So one of the things that I think we could do better in education is think about yield. We don't pay attention to use of the tool. We don't pay attention to the cost of implementation. We don't pay attention to the cost of what we select. So a good first step is what's effective, but there are way more effective, way more expensive solutions and way less expensive solutions. And really, it's our responsibility to think about yield. What's the return on investment for the things that we choose? It's a zero-sum game. I work with systems all the time that are using 3 and 4 and 5, and actually we have a study that's coming out in School Psychology Review. It's accepted, where we looked at a district's practices related to reading screening, and they gave, in this one system where most children are learning to read, this district gave 10 reading screenings in a single year. To me, that's crazy. It's insanity. It's the definition of insanity, and I promise you it's happening in your schools. Overassessment is one of the most pernicious and ubiquitous threats to RTI effects that I have personally seen. And I've built measures, and I encourage people to measure, and I cite Hattie's data with formative assessment showing you the power of measurement, and yet I think what happens is that's easy to train teachers to do. That's easy to train principals to do. They say, okay, that's a good thing. I get praised for doing assessment, so let me do more of that. More might be better. We found a negative correlation. We actually studied benefit using hierarchical linear modeling across 7 schools with about 800 students. In grade 3, we followed them through the end of grade 4. And in this research study, we found a tiny, tiny bit of benefit for frequent reading screening for only the very most at-risk students. We actually found harm for higher performing students. So we have to start paying attention to that. That's about yield. That's about yield. What is the effect for the cost? Well, you only have 2 choices. You can increase the effect or lower the cost if you want to increase yield. So in medicine, I love medical examples because they just seem to work, but we can always look at something like a statin drug. There are probably people in this room who are on a statin drug. Statin drugs are used to lower cholesterol, and everybody takes them, north of 40 and 50. But this is the effect from actual randomized controlled trial data. This is the percentage risk reduction that you get. And the source is right there at the bottom, the nnt.org, which is I love that site. So if you take a statin drug, this is your percent risk reduction. If you take a placebo, there's your effect. I tell you what, I got no problem with the placebo effect when you get a good one. There's nothing wrong with a placebo effect. I do not hate the placebo, but this one, it doesn't work. It shows that there is an effect for statin. But here's the question that wasn't asked. They chose the wrong counterfactual. The best counterfactual is what happens if you just control the diet. So that's a Mediterranean diet. Now, easier said than done, right? Because we don't follow diets. But it is definitely cheaper. It has fewer side effects. And those are the questions we don't ask. So let's talk about how to translate that idea to your academic world. I'm an academic researcher, so all of my examples will be academic, not I love PBIS work, but I don't do that anymore. So mine will all be academic. Here's a take-home. If you do nothing else, use more class-wide intervention. Use more class-wide intervention. You know, I said I love that little site, the nnt.org. That stands for Number Needed to Treat. Number needed to treat is a beautiful risk reduction metric that you can only calculate if you've run a randomized controlled trial. We did that for class-wide math intervention in a district in Mississippi, and with about 700 kids. And we found that the number needed to treat for class-wide math intervention was 7. Guess what number needed to treat for a statin drug is? 196 to 200. Lower is better. 1 is perfection. You never get 1. But what that metric means is, let's say it's 7, which it was for class-wide math intervention. If I give class-wide math intervention to 7 students, I save 1 from failing the high-stakes test. How amazing is that? Pharmaceutical companies are overjoyed to make you get a statin, and insurance companies are happy to pay for it with a number needed to treat of 200. So we can get really, really strong effects for class-wide intervention. So if you take nothing else away, if you want to improve yield, use more class-wide intervention. It's very powerful, especially if your data look like this. These data come from one of my tools, but this is math performance in a class at screening. A lot of places don't even unpack their data at the class level in such a way. And that's crazy. You cannot install tier 3 interventions into this context and have success. And guess what? You cannot do sort of a softball approach to improving core and get much of an effect there either. You have to be more structured, more targeted. Why? Because it's higher yield. You could spend all kinds of money on professional development all year and not change this scenario. You need coaching. You need a specific system for people to follow. You need actual tangible materials that are provided so they have them at their fingertips. You need assistance with the data interpretation from week to week. So teachers are really empowered to do those things that will raise achievement. So the second slide here is to encourage you to manage the interventions that you do. So we prescribe lots of interventions. Just like doctors prescribe lots of medication, I bet there's lots of you in this room who have been prescribed antibiotics and didn't finish the prescription. I am guilty of that. I never finish. I just don't take them anymore because I'm not going to finish it. So unless I'm really dying, I just don't take them. And so far, I just assume I'm really not going to die. But when we say that an intervention is needed, we need to be willing to follow that up to see, did it occur and what's the effect that it's having. So what you're looking at are classes at a single grade level in a single school that were all getting class-wide math intervention. So what we can look at is the number of level changes, that's progress, the number of skills mastered by class, and if everybody is getting the same class-wide intervention, then which classes, I should have done this as a poll, just Coral respond, which classes do we need to go to when I'm only on the ground for 1 day a week? What classes do I need to go and provide some coaching support? 9, 10, and 11. Right, because they are not mastering the skills at the same pace as and you know what happens if you've ever done any coaching? It's this teacher who invites you in. I mean, she meets you at the front door and says, I love the intervention, it's great, come watch me today. And you know what? You want to. It's fun to watch those teachers do it. These teachers, they don't even open their door. They know you're in the building and they're like, oh gosh, I hope she doesn't come to my room. And that's where you need to go. So in my world, I build tools. I have some software, and we actually have a coach dashboard that generates a list, live for the coach and the administrator that says these are the classes that need to be visited because they're not growing like we expect and given math intervention. Okay, so your goal is to make sure that everybody grows. So every line should go up. Now, this child may still get moved to a tier 3 intervention. They grew, but there's a gap. And the gap is not closing. It's not really closing. They're growing at about the same pace as other students in the class. So they may move to a tier 3 or a small group if you happen to have one that fits. But the goal is somebody should be looking at the data every single week to verify that children are growing. I said this, when managed, it really can work, and I gave you the number needed to treat of 7, but look at what happens if you just focus on kids who failed the year-end test from the year before. It's a higher risk group. So great news, if you have a really high risk group, then you've got a better chance to have a more dramatic risk reduction effect. It's a little bit of a silver lining, but you can get a very strong effect. Look at the number needed to treat for children who are on an IEP. If you give 3 children who are on an IEP, if they get class-wide math intervention in general education with their peers, you will save 1 out of 3 of failing the high-stakes test. So, if your state is a state that considers segregating those children or not exposing them to a class-wide intervention, that would not be a wise decision if you care about yield, because they can really, really grow. So we used to say before PBIS, what is the way, or PBS when I was training, but what's the way teachers most commonly try to change behavior? Longer, louder, meaner. Not anymore. But it used to be, like when I was in school, It was longer, louder, meaner. That's how we change behavior. We're doing that. We are making that mistake in academic intervention. So if you want to improve yield, be smarter about how you select your interventions. There is a real instructional science to this. You should know it deeply. It should be your mission for your people to know it deeply because it really, really works. And this is a smarter way to define instructional interactions with child performance in ways that you can develop interventions that will work if correctly used. So if a child is at the acquisition stage of learning, for example, it's a new skill, their response is very likely to be inaccurate. We really don't care how fast they do the work. In fact, we want them to slow down. These are the intervention tactics that work. These are the evidence-based tactics that are aligned with this. So you can't just go to the literature and go, oh, okay, these are evidence-based tactics. I'm going to use them for a child who needs this type of strategy. It doesn't work that way. So what happens is if you're using these tactics for a child who needs fluency building, you actually suppress learning. It's if you like data, it's fun to watch because if a child is matched with the wrong intervention tactic, their trajectories flatten out. Isn't that cool? So this is a smarter way. This is better than longer, louder, meaner. And if you want to improve yield, stop defining intervention intensity as more minutes, fewer kids, more days per week. Stop it, stop it, stop it. It's a bad idea. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It was a first guess effort. I know where it came from. I won't call out the articles because I don't think that person intended for it to be translated so concretely. It was done in a certain way for research purposes, but this is a smarter way. So how do we institutionalize that? Avoiding over-assessment, I said that. This is our, by the way, we had a negative correlation between the amount of screening and outcomes. And so this is an illustration for you. This is a graph that's in our article. We took the commonly used reading screenings. I'm not picking on any of them because I don't care. They all performed the same. So the takeaway message is you don't need all of them. Pick one. I don't care which one you pick, really, if you have a rationale for it. But let the other ones go because it's not helping your decision. So what you're looking at here is the percent of incorrect decisions. So the base rate of failure was 16%. So if you didn't assess at all, you'd miss 16% of kids. But you'd have invested 0 assessment time. If you use curriculum-based measurement, you will make about an 8% error rate, but you will have only spent about 3 minutes total. And if you use DRA, this is a per kid estimate of time, you're about the same accuracy and you will have spent about 30 minutes per kid. And if you use MAP, you will get a little improvement in your accuracy. By this is not that dramatic when you actually look at the numbers and base rates, but it is superior. Of course it would be. It's an hour a kid, just about. It's 45 minutes, and it's expensive. MAP is, I've heard in many places, $15 per kid per year. Holy cow, it's a lot of money. So, you know, this is one way to look at that. Let's pick the highest yield, lowest cost, most accurate screener. Pick one and then do it.